The Nexus station hung in the void like a spinning jewel, all gleaming metal and impossible angles, circling a moon that nobody particularly cared about except for the fact that it belonged to absolutely no one, which made it perfect for diplomacy, education, and the sort of interspecies mingling that usually ended with someone filing a complaint about someone else's dietary habits. Inside that jewel, in a cryopod that had kept her frozen like a very expensive popsicle for 6 months, Cultural Liaison Officer Ellen was finally, mercifully waking up. And oh, she felt like death. Her joints creaked. Her spine felt like someone had replaced her vertebrae with gravel. Her neck, sweet mercy, her neck, had apparently decided to cosplay as a rusty hinge. This was the problem with long-haul space travel. You arrived technically alive, but feeling like you'd been folded into a suitcase and checked as luggage. Ellen stumbled out of the medical bay at approximately 5:45 station time, which was, according to the cheerful holographic display that made her want to punch something, early morning by station standards. Perfect. She needed to move, needed to stretch, needed to remind her body that it was, in fact, supposed to bend at the joints. She made her way through the quiet corridors, past the sealed doors of sleeping quarters, where various species were presumably dreaming their various species-specific dreams. The station was massive, a city in space, but at this hour it felt like a ghost town. Just the hum of life support and the occasional mechanical whir. The observation deck on Level 9 was her destination. She'd studied the station layout during her briefing, and she remembered this spot. A wide, open space with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the stars, usually used for diplomatic receptions and cultural events. At 0600 in the morning? Empty. Hopefully. She palmed the door control, and it slid open with a soft hiss. Empty. Thank the cosmos. Ellen walked to the center of the deck, her bare feet silent on the smooth floor, and just stood there for a moment, looking out at the stars. Took a deep breath. Let it out. Rolled her shoulders and winced at the popping sound that resulted. Right, she muttered to herself. Let's fix this disaster. She started simple. Neck rolls, shoulder circles, the basic stuff to wake everything up. Then she moved into cat-cow stretches, feeling her spine gradually remember that it was supposed to have a curve to it. Downward dog came next, and she groaned, actually groaned out loud, as her hamstrings screamed in protest. What Ellen did not know, could not possibly have known, was that she was being watched. In the shadows near the entrance, pressed against the wall with the stillness that only predators can manage, 5 Ralmathi cubs were having the experience of their young lives. The Ralmathi were, to put it mildly, impressive. Feline in the way that tigers are feline, with sleek fur that ranged from golden amber to deep russet, powerful limbs built for pouncing, and eyes that could track a fly across a football field. They were apex predators on their home world, a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain and then kept climbing until they reached the stars. Their culture revolved around strength, honor, and the warrior's path. Combat training started young, very young, and physical prowess was respected above almost everything else, which is why Pip, Nox, Trill, Miko, and Rust were absolutely transfixed by what they were witnessing. They'd snuck out of their quarters, technically against the rules, but what self-respecting cub didn't bend a few rules, looking for adventure? Or at least something more interesting than staring at the ceiling and waiting for morning drills. They'd heard a human had arrived on station, and humans were, well, they were weird, soft, furless, apparently dangerous in ways that made no sense if you believed the stories, but that seemed unlikely given how breakable they looked. Then they'd seen this human doing something. Something that looked absolutely purposeful and completely baffling. "What is she doing?" Pip whispered, his amber eyes wide. He was the smallest of the group, rust-colored fur with darker stripes, and he had a tendency to ask too many questions. "Shh," Knox hissed. She was slightly older, sleek black fur with silver-tipped ears, and she took the whole stealthy predator thing very seriously. "Watch." They watched. Ellen moved from downward dog into a lunge, her back leg extended, front knee bent, arms raised overhead. To her, this was just a basic yoga flow, the kind of thing she'd done 1,000 times in 1,000 different places. To the cubs, it looked like something else entirely. "That is a pounce preparation stance," Trill breathed. He was gangly for a Ralmathi, all legs and enthusiasm, with tawny fur that stuck up in odd directions. "Look at the back leg extension, the forward weight distribution." "But why hold it?" Miko asked, tilting her head. She was the analytical one, gray fur with distinctive white markings around her eyes that made her look perpetually curious. "In combat, you would spring from that position. Why freeze?" "Training," Rust said with absolute certainty. He was the stockiest of the group, with dark red fur that had earned him his name. "She is building muscle memory, holding the stance to perfect it." Ellen, blissfully unaware of her audience and their interpretation, moved into Warrior 2. Right leg bent, left leg straight, arms extended parallel to the ground, gaze focused over her front hand. She held it, breathing steadily, feeling the burn in her thigh, the stretch in her hips. The cubs nearly fell over. "The honor stance," Knox whispered, and there was genuine awe in her voice. "That is the honor stance. My father holds that position when he accepts a challenge." "She is holding it perfectly," Pip added. "Look at her balance, the alignment. And she is so still." "How long can she hold it?" Trill wondered. They got their answer, a full minute. Then Ellen smoothly transitioned to the other side, left leg bent, right leg straight. Perfect mirror image. "She is training both sides equally," Miko observed, her analytical mind cataloging every detail. "No dominant side weakness. That is advanced warrior methodology." Ellen moved through her flow. Triangle pose, which the cubs interpreted as some kind of lateral strike preparation. Tree pose, which looked to them like single-leg stability training for maintaining balance during aerial attacks. Seated forward fold, which was clearly a flexibility exercise for grappling situations. When she moved into pigeon pose, hip flexor stretch, amazing for tight legs, Rust made a small choking sound. "What?" Pip whispered urgently. "That position," Rust said slowly, "is how Overseer Ralneth demonstrates maximum joint flexibility for ground combat. But he only holds it for 10 seconds before it becomes too painful. She is just sitting there." Ellen was indeed just sitting there, eyes closed, breathing deeply, letting her hip gradually open up. It hurt in that good way that meant she was making progress. She had no idea she was inadvertently demonstrating what the Ralmathi considered advanced pain tolerance training. Then she moved into a supine twist, lying on her back, knees bent and dropped to one side, arms spread wide. "Exposure of vital organs," Knox said flatly. "She is training herself to remain calm while vulnerable. That is master-level mental conditioning." "Or she is insane," Pip offered. "Or both," Trill suggested. Ellen finished with corpse pose, savasana, lying flat on her back, arms at her sides, completely relaxed. To her, this was the best part. The integration. The moment when everything settled, and her body finally felt like it belonged to her again, Instead of being a meat puppet, she was temporarily borrowing. To the cubs, it looked like she was practicing being dead. "Death meditation," Rust said, with something approaching reverence. "I have heard of this. Warriors who train themselves to embrace stillness, to quiet the mind in preparation for the ultimate hunt. My uncle spoke of masters who could lower their heart rate at will." Ellen's heart rate was, in fact, beautifully lowered. Her breathing was deep and even. She felt fantastic. After 10 minutes, she sat up, rolled her shoulders one more time, and smiled. Much better. Humanity's greatest weapon against the universe, it turned out, was yoga and spite, and she had plenty of both. She stood, gathered her towel, and headed for the door, completely oblivious to the 5 pairs of eyes tracking her every movement. The cubs waited until she was gone, until the door had slid shut behind her, before they moved. "That," Pip said slowly, "was the most incredible thing I have ever seen." She made it look effortless, Miko added, "but those positions, those are not effortless. Those require strength, flexibility, control." "We need to learn this," Knox declared, and there was steel in her young voice. "Whatever training method that was, we need to master it." "Agreed," Rust said immediately. "Agreed," Trill and Miko chorused. "But how?" Pip asked. "We cannot simply ask her. If this is secret human warrior training, she will not share it with outsiders." "Then we watch," Knox said simply. "We watch, we learn, we practice, as any good hunter learns by observing prey." "She is not prey," Miko corrected gently. "Fine, as any good student learns by observing a master," Knox amended. "Same principle." "Tomorrow morning," Rust said. "We come back tomorrow morning. We watch again. We memorize every movement." "And then," Trill added, his eyes gleaming with excitement, "we become warriors, like the human." They made their pact there, in the shadows of the observation deck, 5 young Ralmathi who had absolutely no idea what yoga was, what it was for, or why Ellen did it. They only knew that they had witnessed something impressive, something powerful, something warrior-like, and they were going to replicate it if it killed them, which, given their complete lack of understanding about flexibility training and their species' very different joint structure, might not have been entirely hyperbole. The cubs slipped back through the corridors to their quarters, managing to avoid the early shift station workers, their minds already planning tomorrow's observation session. Behind them, the observation deck was empty again, silent except for the hum of the station and the distant infinite stars beyond the windows. And somewhere in her assigned quarters, Ellen was stepping into the shower, feeling pleasantly loose and limber, already looking forward to tomorrow morning's session, completely unaware that she had just acquired 5 very dedicated, very confused students. The universe, as it often did, was preparing to deliver a punchline that nobody had seen coming. And it was going to be hilarious. The next morning, at precisely 05:30 station time, 5 Ralmathi cubs gathered in the cargo bay on level 5. They had chosen this location carefully, large enough for movement, rarely used at this hour, and far enough from the observation deck that they wouldn't risk being discovered before they'd mastered the techniques. "Right," Knox said, standing in the center of the space with the air of someone about to lead troops into battle. "We all observe the human. We all memorize the positions. Now we replicate." "Should we warm up first?" Miko asked, ever practical. "We are Ralmathi," Rust said dismissively. "We are always ready." This confidence would prove to be spectacularly misplaced. "The first position," Pip said, closing his eyes to recall the memory. She bent forward, placed her hands on the ground, and raised her hindquarters while, keeping her legs straight. "The pounce preparation stance," Trill agreed. "Simple enough." They spread out, giving each other space. On Knox's count of 3, they all bent forward, placed their front paws on the ground, and attempted to straighten their back legs while keeping their hindquarters elevated. What followed was chaos. Pip, being smaller and more flexible than he'd given himself credit for, actually managed something close to the position. Then immediately panicked because his blood rushed to his head and he thought he was having a medical emergency. He yelped and collapsed sideways. Trill got his front paws down, but his back legs refused to straighten, leaving him stuck in an awkward crouch that looked more like he was preparing to use a litter box than practicing warrior techniques. His gangly limbs trembled with effort. Rust, stocky and powerful, got into position, and immediately felt something in his shoulder make a popping sensation that was definitely not supposed to happen. "Gah! What was that?" Miko, analytical to the end, was carefully adjusting her position millimeter by millimeter, trying to achieve the exact angle she'd observed. This meant she was moving so slowly that she looked like a statue having an existential crisis. Knox got closest to the actual pose, but her feline spine, designed for pouncing and sprinting, curved in ways that made Downward Dog look more like Downward question mark. This is not comfortable." "The human held it for a full minute," Pip wheezed from the floor. "How?" "She is clearly a master," Rust grunted, trying to shake out his shoulder. "We are novices. We must practice." They tried again, and again. By the 5th attempt, they'd managed to all hold something vaguely resembling the pose for approximately 8 seconds before Trill's back legs gave out, and he face-planted into the deck with a thud that echoed through the cargo bay. "Next position," Knox declared, refusing to admit defeat. "The honor stance." Warrior 2 pose was somehow both easier and harder. The basic shape, one leg bent, one straight, arms extended, made sense to their predator bodies. The holding it perfectly still for a full minute part? That made no sense whatsoever. "Why do the arms not tire?" Pip demanded after 20 seconds, his limbs shaking. "Why does she not lower them?" "Mental. Discipline," Miko managed, though her own arms were beginning to droop. "Training the mind to overcome physical discomfort." "This is just discomfort," Rust muttered. "This is torture." They held it, barely, for 35 seconds, before all 5 cubs simultaneously gave up and lowered their arms with groans of relief. "We will build up to a minute," Knox said firmly. "Like any combat training, it requires repetition." "My shoulders are on fire," Trill complained. "Then they are being forged in the flames of improvement," Knox shot back. This went on for 45 minutes. They attempted tree pose, and discovered that balancing on one leg while holding the other leg bent was a recipe for 5 cubs hopping around the cargo bay like deranged flamingos. They tried triangle pose and learned that stretching sideways while keeping both legs straight required hip flexibility that their species simply did not naturally possess. Though Miko noted that she could feel her muscles stretching in ways they'd never stretched before, which was either good or a sign of impending injury. Pigeon pose was where things got really interesting. "She sat like this," Pip demonstrated, trying to remember the exact position. One leg bent in front, one extended behind, and she just sat. They attempted it. Rust got stuck. Actually stuck. His hip joint, not designed for this particular angle, seized up, and he found himself trapped in position, unable to move forward or backward. "Help. I am not joking. Someone help." It took all 4 of the other cubs pushing and pulling, very carefully, to extract him from the pose. Rust limped in a circle afterward, looking betrayed by his own body. The human sat in that position for 3 full minutes, Knox said, watching Rust's recovery with concern. 3 minutes. The human is not Ralmathi, Miko observed. Perhaps their joints are constructed differently. More flexible. They are soft skins, Trill said. We always assumed that meant weak. But what if soft means adaptable? This was a revelation that would have profound implications for Ralmathi understanding of human physiology. But right now, it mainly meant that 5 cubs were realizing they'd bitten off more than they could chew. They were not, however, quitters. The final position they attempted was corpse pose, which seemed deceptively simple. Lie down. Be still. But when they all arranged themselves on the cargo bay floor, flat on their backs, trying to quiet their minds and relax completely, they discovered something unsettling. Predators are not designed to be vulnerable. Every instinct screamed at them to roll over, to stay alert, to keep their vital organs protected. "This feels wrong," Pip whispered after 30 seconds. "This feels very wrong." "It is death meditation," Rust reminded him. "It is supposed to feel wrong. That is the point. We are training ourselves to overcome instinct." "I hate this," Trill muttered. "I also hate this," Knox admitted. "Concurred," Miko added. But they stayed there, all 5 of them, lying on their backs in the cargo bay, forcing themselves to remain still and vulnerable, convinced they were engaging in advanced warrior mental conditioning and definitely not just taking a weirdly positioned nap. That was when Overseer Ralneth found them. The cargo bay door slid open with its characteristic hiss, and the Overseer, a battle-scarred veteran with iron-gray fur and eyes that missed absolutely nothing, stood in the entrance, staring at the tableau before him. 5 cubs, on their backs, completely still. For a moment, Ralneth thought they might be injured. Then Pip's tail twitched, and he realized they were conscious, and doing this on purpose. "What?" Ralneth said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen many strange things in his military career, but was now witnessing something that defied categorization. "Are you doing?" 5 cubs scrambled to their feet with varying degrees of grace. Knox, being Knox, immediately stood at attention. The others followed suit, though Trill nearly fell over because his legs had fallen asleep. "Training, Overseer," Knox said crisply. "Training," Ralneth repeated. He walked into the cargo bay, circling the cubs slowly. "Training for what, exactly? A competition to see who can impersonate cargo the most convincingly?" "No, Overseer," Rust said. "We are practicing the human warrior techniques." Ralneth stopped walking. "The what?" "The human warrior techniques," Miko elaborated. "We observed the human performing advanced combat training exercises. We are attempting to replicate them." "We saw her do the pounce preparation stance," Pip added helpfully. "And the honor stance. And the death meditation." Ralneth looked at each cub in turn. He had trained young warriors for 15 cycles. He had dealt with enthusiasm, overconfidence, and the occasional bout of complete insanity that seemed to strike cubs at this age. But this was new. "Show me," he said finally, "these human warrior techniques." The cubs exchanged glances. Then, with the sort of determination that would have been admirable if it weren't about to be hilarious, they demonstrated. They showed him their interpretation of downward dog, which looked like 5 cubs trying to simultaneously touch the ground and fall over. They showed him Warrior 2, arms shaking, legs trembling, lasting maybe 15 seconds before collapse. They attempted to show him tree pose and ended up hopping around like they were standing on hot coals. Ralneth watched all of this with an expression that slowly morphed from confusion to disbelief to something that might have been the beginning of a headache. When they finished, collapsing in various states of exhaustion, the overseer was silent for a long moment. "You believe," he said carefully, "that these positions are combat training?" "Yes, overseer," they chorused. "And you observed a human performing them?" "Yes, overseer." "Which human?" "The new one," Knox said. "The cultural liaison who arrived yesterday. We saw her on the observation deck at dawn." Ralneth pinched the bridge of his muzzle. "And it did not occur to any of you to simply ask what she was doing?" 5 blank stares. "We assumed it was secret training," Pip offered. "Warriors do not share their secret techniques with outsiders." "These are not warrior techniques," Ralneth began, then stopped. Because the truth was, he had no idea what they were. He had never seen anything like it. "I will investigate this matter. In the meantime, you are to attend regular morning drills. Understood?" "Yes, overseer," they said, disappointment clear in their voices. As Ralneth left the cargo bay, he found himself genuinely curious. What had the human been doing? And more importantly, why did it look warrior-like enough to convince 5 intelligent cubs that they were witnessing combat training? He made a mental note to observe this human himself. Behind him, the cubs waited until he was gone, then looked at each other. "We practice again tomorrow," Knox said. "Agreed," the others replied. Word spread through the Ralmathi youth quarters like wildfire through dry grass. Within 3 days, the 5 original cubs had become 20. Within a week, 30 young Ralmathi were gathering in Cargo Bay 5 at 05:115 every morning, attempting what they had collectively begun calling the Human Flexibility Protocols. The thing about young predators is that they are, by nature, competitive. When Pip mentioned that he could hold the honor stance for 45 seconds now, Trill immediately declared he could do 50. When Knox demonstrated improved balance in tree pose, others pushed themselves harder. The training sessions became a strange combination of genuine physical improvement and absolute chaos. What the cubs did not realize, what they could not have known, was that their regular combat instructors were noticing changes. "Your balance has improved," Instructor Moth told Knox during sparring practice. Moth was lean and dangerous, with scars across her muzzle that spoke of real combat experience. "What have you been doing differently?" "Just extra training, Instructor," Knox said carefully. "Whatever it is, continue it," Moth replied, then threw a strike that Knox deflected with noticeably better stability than she'd had the previous week. Similar conversations were happening across the training facility. Cubs who had been struggling with flexibility were suddenly able to execute movements that had previously been beyond them. Their breathing during high-intensity drills was more controlled. Their recovery time between exercises had shortened. And then there was Rust, who had discovered something unexpected. After practicing the death meditation position for several minutes each morning, he felt calmer, less reactive. His tendency to charge into situations without thinking had diminished. His instructors noticed. His peers noticed. Rust himself noticed, though he attributed it entirely to warrior mental conditioning rather than, literally just lying down and relaxing for 5 minutes. Overseer Ralneth noticed everything. He had been watching the human, Ellen, according to her station file, for 6 days now. Every morning at 600, she appeared on the observation deck and performed her routine. He watched from a concealed position, taking mental notes, trying to understand what he was seeing. It looked like combat training. The positions required strength, flexibility, control. But there was no opponent. No strikes, no blocks, no defensive maneuvers. Just movement and stillness, flow and hold, breathing and balance. It made no sense. On the 9th day of observation, Ralneth made a decision. He would ask. He waited until Ellen finished her routine, then stepped out from his concealed position as she was gathering her towel. Ellen, to her credit, did not scream or jump. She did tense up for a moment. Having a massive feline predator suddenly appear would do that. But she recovered quickly, offering a polite smile. "Good morning," she said. "You are Overseer Ralneth, correct? I reviewed the station personnel files." "Correct," Ralneth replied. His voice was deep, gravelly, the kind of voice that commanded attention. "I apologize for startling you. I wish to inquire about your morning activities." Ellen blinked. "My morning activities? You mean this?" She gestured vaguely at the space where she'd been practicing. "Yes. The cubs under my supervision have been attempting to replicate what you do. They believe it to be advanced warrior training." Ellen stared at him. Then she started laughing, not mockingly, but with genuine surprised delight. "They think yoga is warrior training." "Yoga?" Ralneth repeated the unfamiliar word carefully. "Yes, it is. How do I explain this? It is a human practice focused on flexibility, strength, and mental relaxation. We do it for health, for stress relief, for staying limber, especially after cryo-sleep, which makes you feel like someone folded you into a box." Ralneth processed this information. "It is not combat training." "It is very definitely not combat training," Ellen confirmed, still smiling. "Though I suppose some of the poses look kind of fierce if you do not know the context." "The cubs have been practicing this yoga for 9 days," Ralneth said slowly. "They wake before dawn. They push themselves to hold positions that cause them obvious discomfort. They have named the poses things like pounce preparation stance and honor stance." "Oh no," Ellen said, though she was still smiling. "Oh, those poor kids. They have been trying to do Warrior 2 and Downward Dog thinking they are learning combat moves?" "I believe so, yes." "That is—" Ellen paused, trying to find the right word. "Adorable? Concerning? Both?" "Their combat performance has improved," Ralneth said, and this was the part that had been bothering him for 3 days. "Measurably. Their flexibility, their balance, their breathing control, their mental focus, all improved. The cubs who have been practicing your yoga are outperforming their peers in nearly every metric." Ellen stopped smiling. "Wait, really? I would not say it if it were not true." "But it is just stretching," Ellen protested. "Just breathing exercises and flexibility work. It is not supposed to make you better at fighting." "And yet," Ralneth said simply. They stood there in silence for a moment, Human and Ralmathi, both trying to process the implications. "Would you be willing to demonstrate for Station Command?" Ralneth asked finally. "There are questions being raised about unauthorized training activities. It would be beneficial to clarify the situation." "Of course," Ellen agreed, "though I am not sure what I am clarifying exactly. I have just been doing my normal morning routine." "Normal for humans," Ralneth observed. "Extraordinary for young Ralmathi who have never encountered such concepts." That afternoon, Ellen found herself in Conference Room 3 with Overseer Ralneth, Commander Thane, the human station commander who looked perpetually tired and mildly amused by the universe, and a delegation of 3 adult Ralmathi who introduced themselves as the Youth Development Council. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Commander Thane said, leaning back in his chair with the air of someone who had dealt with stranger situations but could not quite remember when. 30 Ralmathi cubs have been secretly practicing yoga because they think it is human warrior training. That is correct, Ralneth confirmed, and their combat performance has actually improved as a result. Also correct. But yoga is not combat training. I have been assured by cultural liaison Ellen that it is not, Ralneth said, gesturing to Ellen, who nodded. It is genuinely just stretching and breathing, Ellen said. I do it because it feels good and keeps me healthy. The fact that it is improving their combat metrics is unexpected. One of the Youth Development Council members, an older Ralmati named Ul Shara with silver-streaked fur, spoke up. We have reviewed the performance data. The cubs engaging in this activity show a 23% improvement in flexibility, 18% improvement in balance assessment scores, and significant improvements in breath control during high-intensity exercises. These are not insignificant gains. Additionally, another council member added, several cubs report improved emotional regulation and decreased anxiety responses. This is particularly notable in Rust, who previously struggled with impulse control. Commander Thane looked at Ellen. You taught them meditation techniques? I did not teach them anything, Ellen protested. They watched me do corpse pose, savasana, which is where you lie on your back and relax. That is it. You just relax. The cubs call it death meditation, Ralneth said. They believe it is advanced mental conditioning to overcome survival instincts. Ellen put her face in her hands. They are lying down and taking a rest. That is all they are doing. A rest that results in measurable improvements in stress response, Ulshara noted. Regardless of intention, the results speak for themselves. So, what do we do about this? Commander Thane asked. Technically, unauthorized training activities are against station regulations for youth participants. But if the activity is beneficial, we could simply inform the cubs that it is not warrior training, one council member suggested. End the misconception. They will be devastated, Ralneth said quietly. They have invested significant pride in mastering what they believe to be human warrior techniques. To tell them it is merely stretching would be a blow to their confidence. But continuing to let them believe a lie is also problematic, Ulshara countered. Ellen had been quiet, thinking. Now she spoke up. What if we reframe it? Not as combat training, but as supplementary conditioning. Physical preparation that supports combat training? That is not a lie. Clearly, it does support their combat performance. We just provide accurate context. The room considered this. And, Ellen continued, gaining confidence, what if I actually taught them properly? Instead of them trying to copy what they see and potentially hurting themselves, I could run actual sessions. Explain what each pose does, why it helps, how to do it safely. You would be willing to do this? Ralneth asked. I mean, I am already doing my morning routine. If having some cubs join me means they do it correctly, instead of getting stuck in pigeon pose and needing to be extracted. She glanced at Ralneth, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Yes, I am willing. Commander Thane smiled. This is the strangest diplomatic incident I have handled this month, and last week we had the situation with the Nith claiming the water filtration system was haunted. He looked at the Ralmati Council members. Your call. This is your youth program. The three council members looked at each other, engaging in some kind of silent communication that species who have worked together for years can manage. We approve a trial program, Ulshara announced. 3 months. Cultural liaison. Ellen will conduct supervised flexibility and mental conditioning sessions. We will monitor performance metrics. If benefits continue and no injuries occur, we will consider making it permanent. One condition, another council member added. We do not call it yoga." Ellen blinked. "Why not?" "Because if we tell the cubs that the human flexibility protocols they have been practicing are called yoga, they will feel foolish. If we tell them they have been correctly identifying valuable training and we are now formalizing it, they will feel validated." "You want to save their pride," Ellen said slowly. "They are young warriors in training," Ralneth said. "Pride matters." Commander Thane laughed. Actually laughed. "So we are officially rebranding yoga as human flexibility combat preparation to protect the feelings of cubs who accidentally discovered that stretching is good for you." "When you phrase it that way, it sounds absurd," Ulshara said. "It is absurd," Thane agreed cheerfully. "But it is also kind." "Approve. Make it happen." And just like that, Ellen went from cultural liaison officer to diplomatic wellness combat instructor, a title that would go on her official station records and make absolutely no sense to anyone who reviewed her file in the future. "I have one request," Ellen said. "Yes?" Ralneth asked. "Can I watch them practice? Just once? Before I start teaching them properly? I really want to see what they have been doing." Ralneth's whiskers twitched in what might have been amusement. "That can be arranged." The next morning, at precisely 05:15, Ellen stood at the entrance to Cargo Bay 5, with Overseer Ralneth beside her. Through the partially open door, she could hear movement, the soft padding of paws, whispered instructions in the Ralmathi language. "They have no idea we are here?" Ellen whispered. "None," Ralneth confirmed. "I told them I would be conducting equipment inspections this morning. They believe they are unobserved." "This feels slightly mean." "You requested this," Ralneth reminded her. I know. Okay, let us watch." What Ellen witnessed in the next 20 minutes was simultaneously the most endearing and most concerning thing she had seen since arriving on Nexus Station. 30 Ralmathi cubs, arranged in rough rows, were attempting yoga poses with the kind of fierce determination usually reserved for actual combat. Knox stood at the front, apparently the informal leader, calling out positions in a commanding voice that would have made a drill sergeant proud. "Pounce preparation stance," Knox called out. 30 cubs bent forward into their interpretation of downward dog. It was a disaster. But it was an enthusiastic disaster. Some had their legs too wide. Others had their paws positioned incorrectly. Trill appeared to be doing some kind of modified handstand. Pip was shaking so hard he looked like he was vibrating. But they were all trying, every single one of them holding the position with grim determination. "Breathe," Knox commanded. "Control your breath. The human breathes with perfect rhythm." They were breathing, though it sounded more like 30 cubs having a collective asthma attack than any kind of controlled pranayama. Ellen covered her mouth to keep from laughing. Beside her, Ralneth's whiskers were twitching again. "Honor stance," Knox called. The transition was chaos. Cubs bumped into each other. Someone's tail smacked someone else in the face. But they got there eventually, spreading into Warrior 2 with varying degrees of success. Some had beautiful form. Miko, in particular, had clearly been paying very close attention to Ellen's alignment. Others looked like they were attempting to signal aircraft while standing on one leg. "Hold," Knox commanded. "We hold for 1 full minute. We are warriors. We do not yield to burning muscles." 30 seconds in, the burning muscles started winning. Arms began to droop. Legs began to shake. Rust, stocky, and powerful, was grimacing like someone had personally insulted his ancestors. Pip looked on the verge of tears, but refused to lower his arms. They made it to 52 seconds before the first cub dropped their arms. Then it was like dominoes. Everyone else gave up within the next 3 seconds, groaning and shaking out their limbs. "Better," Knox said, though she was panting. "Last week we could only manage 40 seconds. We improve daily." "Tree pose," someone called from the back. It sounded like Trill. Oh no, Ellen thought. 30 cubs attempted to balance on one leg while holding the other leg bent. The results were predictable: hopping, wobbling, falling, crashing into neighbors, creating a chain reaction of toppling Ralmathi that looked like the universe's furriest domino rally. But they got back up. Every single one of them got back up and tried again. "The human held this for 2 full minutes," Miko called out, her analytical voice cutting through the chaos. "On each leg, without wobbling." "Then we will work toward 2 minutes," Knox declared. "Again!" They tried again, and again. By the 5th attempt, about half of them could maintain balance for more than 10 seconds. Miko managed 20. Knox, through sheer force of will, made it to 35 seconds before her leg gave out. Then came the part Ellen had been both anticipating and dreading: pigeon pose. "Hip flexibility exercise," Knox announced. "This one is difficult. Do not push beyond your limits. Rust, you are excused from this one." "I can do it," Rust protested. "Last time you got stuck, and we needed 5 cubs to extract you," Knox reminded him. "You are excused." Rust grumbled, but sat it out, which was probably wise. The remaining cubs attempted pigeon pose with varying degrees of success and discomfort. Most could approximate the position, though their feline hip structure meant it would never look quite like the human version. What impressed Ellen was their caution. They were actually listening to their bodies, backing off when something felt wrong, supporting each other. "The human sits in this position and looks peaceful," Pip observed, his voice strained. "I sit in this position and question all my life choices." Several cubs made sounds of agreement. "That is because we are still learning," Miko said. "Mastery takes time. The human has probably practiced for years." Ellen had indeed practiced for years, though she had never imagined her practice would inspire a generation of young aliens to torture themselves in the name of warrior excellence. Finally, they moved to the position they called death meditation. "Remember," Knox said quietly, as they all arranged themselves on their backs, "this is about conquering instinct, about training the mind to remain calm in vulnerability. Focus on your breathing. Clear your thoughts. Embrace the stillness." 30 cubs lay on the cargo bay floor, flat on their backs, trying desperately to relax. It lasted about 90 seconds before Pip said, "I still hate this part." "We all hate this part," Trill agreed. "The human does this for 10 minutes, Miko reminded them, "without moving, without fidgeting." "The human is terrifying," Rust muttered, from his position sitting against the wall. They managed another minute of stillness before Knox called the session to an end. The cubs rose, stretched, and began discussing their progress, their improvements, their goals for tomorrow's session. Ellen stepped into the cargo bay. The effect was immediate and dramatic. 30 cubs froze. 30 pairs of eyes locked onto her. The silence was deafening. "Good morning," Ellen said gently. "I am Ellen. I believe you have all been watching me on the observation deck." Knox stepped forward, the leader even in this moment of potential disaster. "We apologize if we have given offense. We did not mean to intrude on your private training." "You did not give offense," Ellen assured her. "But I think we need to talk about what you have been practicing." "We know we are still learning," Pip said quickly. "We are not yet masters like you, but we are improving." "You are improving," Ellen agreed. I could see that. Your dedication is impressive. But I need to tell you something important about what I was doing on the observation deck. 30 cubs braced themselves for disappointment. The practice you have been replicating is called yoga, Ellen said. It is not warrior training. It is a flexibility and wellness practice that humans do for health, stress relief, and physical maintenance. The silence that followed was crushing. Ellen could see it on their faces. The disappointment, the embarrassment, the feeling that they had been working so hard for something that turned out to be nothing. However, Ellen continued quickly, Overseer Ralneth and the Youth Development Council have been monitoring your progress. They have noticed that cubs who practice yoga show significant improvements in flexibility, balance, breathing control, and emotional regulation. Your combat scores have improved. Your stress responses have improved. The practice is helping you become better warriors, even though that is not what it was designed for. Confusion replaced disappointment. Miko tilted her head. So, it is not warrior training, but it makes us better warriors? Exactly, Ellen said. And because the benefits are real and measurable, the station has approved a formal program. I am going to teach you properly. The correct way to do each pose, how to breathe, how to avoid injury, what each position actually does for your body. You will teach us? Knox asked, and there was hope in her voice. If you want to learn, yes. We want to learn, Pip exclaimed, then looked embarrassed at his outburst. We very much want to learn, Miko added more calmly. Though I am curious, if the purpose is not combat preparation, why do the positions require such strength and control? Because staying healthy and flexible requires strength and control, Ellen explained. Just because something is peaceful in purpose does not mean it is easy in practice. That, Rust said thoughtfully, actually makes sense. So, starting tomorrow, Ellen said, official sessions, 05:30 in this cargo bay. I will teach you properly. No more getting stuck in pigeon pose. Rust looked away, his ears flattening in embarrassment. One more thing, Ellen added. The official name of the program is Human Flexibility Combat Preparation. Because while yoga is not combat training, it does prepare your body to be stronger, more flexible, and more controlled, all of which support combat training. So you were not entirely wrong in your interpretation. Human Flexibility Combat Preparation, Knox repeated, testing the words. That sounds appropriately warrior-like. That is the idea, Ellen said, smiling. The cubs exploded into excited chatter, discussing this development, already planning for tomorrow's session, theorizing about what new techniques they might learn. Ralneth stepped into the cargo bay, and the cubs immediately fell silent and stood at attention. You heard Cultural Liaison Ellen, he said. This is now an official program. You will attend, you will learn properly, and you will not, he looked directly at Rust, get stuck in positions that require extraction teams. Yes, Overseer, they chorused. As the cubs filed out, heading to their regular morning drills, Pip approached Ellen shyly. The death meditation? He said quietly. You called it something else. What is its real name? Savasana, Ellen said. It means corpse pose. Pip's eyes widened. So we were actually correct about that one? The name, yes. The purpose, not quite. It is not about training for death. It is about complete relaxation, letting go of tension and stress. Can you still call it death meditation during class? Pip asked. It sounds much more impressive that way. Ellen laughed. Sure, we can call it death meditation. Pip brightened and scampered after his friends. Ralneth watched the cubs disappear down the corridor. You handled that well. Thanks, Ellen said, though I still cannot believe this is happening. I am now officially teaching yoga to alien warrior cubs who think stretching is extreme training. From their perspective, Ralneth observed, it is. They are pushing their bodies in new ways, building capabilities they did not have before. That is the definition of training, regardless of the original intent. That is surprisingly philosophical. I am a surprisingly philosophical individual, Ralneth said deadpan. Ellen grinned. I think this is the start of a very weird friendship. Agreed, Ralneth said. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to file a report explaining why 30 cubs under my supervision have been secretly practicing human wellness techniques because they thought it would make them better at combat. Good luck with that. I suspect I will need it.